Welcome, one and all, to the Gap Discipline Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm AJ, and we're at that time, ladies and gents. It is the first week of April, basically into the second week of April now. Draft season is in full swing. And with the amount of times in the circles that I play Dynasty Fantasy Football in that I've been asked about the upcoming draft, what to expect, I figured it would just be a whole lot easier to distill that into a podcast episodes. 95% of the content that I consume during the day is audio podcasts. Every once in a while I do have that video stuff. I'm trying out the video today, so if you happen to be finding me in audio, just know it is available if you'd rather just see a person. And I do have a graphic that I'll be using. But the reason we're here is I have a real live rookie draft that I've completed in a degenerate league of mine that talks shop all year long, trades all year long. It doesn't stop based on where the calendar is. And so this is no longer about theoretical. This is no longer about predictions and whatnot. We're pen to paper here. Picks are spent, trades are made. So if you want a more condensed version of this, I do have shorter videos on other platforms. You can follow, and find them elsewhere. But if you like this type of content, I've got a lot more coming. There's just so much edge that you can gain before everything becomes consensus. But without any further ado, let's get right into it. Here's a draft board. These are all real picks. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. Each one of these colored boxes is a tier. Starting off, pick 101. No surprises here. Jeremiah Love is my number one prospect. He's a one-man tier for me. I've been pretty consistent on that from the very beginning. There's a few different reasons for that. So it is a perfectly reasonable feeling, especially if you're not a contending team, to tend to shy away from running backs early in the build when you don't have your foundation set. That is not how I build. It's just not. I draft the best players. I don't believe that you're locked into any player at any time. And thereby, I don't feel like I'm jumping the gun by taking the best prospect that happens to be at the wrong position that I'm not comfortable with. The perfect example of why I'm not afraid to take a player like Jeremiah Love. Let's see how many times I can do that. Because of what happened, let's say with Ashton Jeanty last year. Things were probably as bad as they could get for Ashton Jeanty last year when he was drafted 6th overall to the Raiders. No offensive line, no offensive production to speak of. And not only by sheer volume did he finish as a top 12 fantasy running back, but if you actually just look at any calculator, find any calculator you want, KTC, Dynasty, Calc, whatever you use, he's almost exactly the same value that he was a year ago before he ever played it down. So even if things go poorly for Jeremiah Love year one, I don't think this is going to be like a sunk cost thing right out the gate where you're regretting the pick. He's the only one in the blue tier. We'll scroll over to the green tier, and it's these remaining five players. So we Kenan Sadiq, Fernando Mendoza, Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, and Mekhi Lemon. So in this particular draft, Kenan Sadiq was actually the one that went 102 right after Jeremiah Love. Kind of caught a lot of people off guard. I gotta tell you though, I personally am not super high on Kenan Sadiq, but I very much understand the rationality behind the pick. The particular team who this pick was made by did not have a dire quarterback need. So I think you're going to see Kenan Sadiq 2 overall a lot less in your average leagues because Fernando Mendoza was right there. But this is also a tight end premium. Putting up a combine like he did, the production that he put up in college, tight end's hard to draft as it is. So when you see somebody that shows not just signs of life in college, but is the focal point of an offense, it's always worth a swing, especially if you're going to be reaping that tight end premium bonus in your scoring week to week. And then, of course, we've got the trio. This is the hotly debated trio of Tate, Tyson, Lemon. I think it's justified that you can pretty much go any way that you want with these guys, and I do mean that sincerely. I personally have Carnell Tate as the preferred option over all these guys in a vacuum, but I would not say that that's a firm declaration. It seems like he's hammering out to be the consensus, number one wide receiver in the class, but I really don't think it's that strong. So I'm not going to go super deep into each one of their analyses. That can be a different topic of conversation, but generally this is what you're going to be seeing. In almost all cases, you're going to see Jeremiah Love go first, and then the cluster of five remaining being Fernando Mendoza, Kenan Sadiq, and then the three wide receivers. You should be just earmarking top six of this draft as these are picks I want, and other people should want too. So market-wise, that's where you should be sitting. That's absolutely the drop-off of the first round. I don't think it's close. Oh, other main thing I got to touch on here. We are officially on Jordan Tyson watch right here. Okay. As of 2 months ago, Jordan Tyson was synonymous with any one of these other wide receivers as number one in this class. He is still working his way back from a litany of injuries. He hasn't done any type of testing. It's concerning that he's still dealing with these type of things after such a long period of time. If for some reason he starts to slip in the NFL draft, or falls out of the first round entirely, you have to pay attention. Now, this is not something I'm expecting. I fully expect Tyson to go within the top 20, 25 picks. I really don't think he's going to fall out of the first round. He's just super, super talented. If he does fall out and some of these other back six players do get first round capital or comparable capital, I could absolutely see a world where Jordan Tyson is sliding further towards the 8, 9, 10 range. You've got, in my opinion, you got to pounce on that. You got to pounce on that. We can have a conversation about Casey Concepcion, a couple of the other guys back here, but it's a slim pickings at that point. And at a certain point, Jordan Tyson is too talented to let slide any further compared to the level of prospect that's at the back of this first round. Which brings us to the back 6 or 7, let's say. So we went Casey Concepcion 1-7, followed by Jadarian Price 108, Eli Stowers 9, David Boston. Nope, not David Boston. Denzel Boston. If you've been playing football a long time, you'll know who David Boston is. Then, of course, Mike Washington at 11 and Omar Cooper at 12. So I have this tier, pretty much I called it like A and 3B. There's a reason for that. Technically speaking, I kind of view all 6 players in this tier in one tier. The only difference, though, is that according to consensus, you're going to be hard-pressed to find some of these guys going ahead of others. So case in point is going to be Casey Concepcion. Casey already is like the hype bunny of the Dynasty community. He grades very well in reception perception if you get that subscription. So Omar Cooper's a difficult evaluation. Most of his elite production this year was scheme targets. It's a lot of slot RPO stuff that is very, very hard to project at the next level just because teams don't really target funnel manufactured targets that way, not the successful offenses anyway. When your offense can cater to your scheme touches the way like Kansas City did with Rashee Rice, that's obviously going to reap the benefit. But NFL offenses eventually have to grow beyond that. They need to evolve past that. Eli Stowers is another one that has really gained a lot of steam. As a general rule, I'll play the scoring game, I'll play the depth game, I'll play the need game, but I am very hesitant to draft tight ends high. Everyone's been raving about him since the combine. So I don't hate the pick. And the remaining 3 in the first round are Jadarian Price, Denzel Boston, and Mike Washington. I'll tell you straight up, I really don't like the Mike Washington pick at all. I have been wary of him going first round ever since he put up the combine numbers. If we're going to be excited about Mike Washington, you also have to realize that at the combine, he didn't do anything except run the 40. Does have solid production in a power conference, but it came late in his career. So I am just not willing to grant him first round status, in my opinion, and feel great about it. If I absolutely have to take a running back in the first round, I'm taking Jadarian Price. I just think he's a better overall running back, even though he may be slower. I just think he has the better vision and the better feel for the position, even if he lacks that top end speed. And of course, Denzel Boston. People are all over the map on Denzel Boston. I think that the Michael Pittman Jr. comp is probably the best one. And the simple reason for that is when Michael Pittman Jr. came out, he was very much this prototypical size, prototypical physicality, and we expected the moon from him, in a draft that also featured T. Higgins and Justin Jefferson. It was a loaded class. But when he actually got to the NFL, he was best short and underneath. All of his most productive seasons with the Colts were all of the inside 10 yards routes. So your stops, your hits, your slants, your screens, and of course, red zone work. He never really took that next step as a downfield threat. And unfortunately, I think Denzel Boston falls into that similar category. And the other thing with Boston is if you just look at the rest of the Washington wide receiver products that have come out the last few years, if you're talking about Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk and of course, Rome Odunze, I am not prepared to live in a reality where Denzel Boston is the best one of them to come out of Washington in recent years because I don't like him nearly as much as a prospect as I did like Rome Odunze, for example. But I'm still willing to play ball. I think this is a guy that has wide receiver 2 upside, maybe flirts with wide receiver 1 upside, similar to the way Michael Pittman did in his Colts tenure. The other thing I wanted to mention about the first round is 7, 8, and 9 actually got traded for mid-draft. It was by a player that was offloading a bunch of vets. They traded away like Derrick Henry. They traded away George Kittle. There was a bunch of offloads. And unfortunately, if you are a rebuilding team, this is what you're going to be looking at. So if you're going to do so, I know it may not be appropriate value to target 1.7, 1.8, 1.9, but this collection of Concepcion, Stowers, Boston, Cooper, that's probably going to be your best case scenario for a return this year because everybody's going to be death gripping those 27 picks. You're way past the boat on that. So if you are ready to cut your losses, do so. And I'm okay with the return here. We'll move over into the second round here. Scroll myself all the way back there. So if you noticed, Ty Simpson was the last big name that did not actually go in the first round. And I fully support him not going in the first round if we're talking pre-draft. Ty Simpson is a quarterback. A quarterback like this, especially a prospect like this, is going to be almost entirely dependent on what real draft capital they get in the NFL draft, as well as what team they land with. I understand playing the positional value and taking him at like 111, 112. If he lands with like the Jets, you can't make me excited about that. You can't. Even if he goes first round, I'm also not excited about going to the in the 20s to the Steelers. I'm not excited about that either. But if he was to, like, say, land with the Rams, one of those, put him in the first round firmly. If you want to take him in the first round, I think it's a fair gamble in a draft like this, as long as specific other players are off the board, mainly some of those guys in that 3A, 3B tier. But along with Ty Simpson, there's three other players in that tier. We've got Jonah Coleman, the running back, Chris Brazzell, and Chris Bell, the wide receivers. So these are pretty polarizing players. Coleman, at one point, seemed to be the running back 2 in the class. I think he's sort of fallen back on that. Jonah Coleman hasn't tested. I tend to be a bit hesitant with overly physical running backs just because if that's your number one calling card in college and you're dominant, it is entirely different scenario to take that, that attack plan and go hit the biggest, best athletes in the world. In the NFL. So I had similar concerns with how physical and violent Ashton Ginty was last year. Jonah Coleman's not the athlete that Ginty is. It's just something I'm highly aware of. But I will say he is a hands catcher, which is odd for a really bowling ball stocky type running back that he is. I'm wary about how much upside you're actually going to get out of a player like Jonah Coleman, but I am fully on board with a second round pick. As long as I don't have to do it in the back of the first round, I'm not chasing that dragon, not for me. Brazzell and Bell. Chris Bell, I think, was actually getting a lot of potential first-round hype before his ACL tear. It was a late ACL tear, too. I would be shocked if he went first round now, just because we haven't seen anything. We're not sure where he's going to be going in drafts, but he is a guy that I've quietly earmarked as like a major target before this drop-off happens in the NFL draft. If he was to land somewhere like Tennessee, if he was to land somewhere like Jacksonville, if he was to land somewhere even like Miami, they're either landing on an excellent offense or to land on somewhere that just has wide open competition. I think he's a specimen. If you're looking for the buy low via injury bug, number one with a bullet, in my opinion. And Chris Brazzell, you try not to helmet scout, but him being from Tennessee, a wide receiver from Tennessee, it is a very hard program to get the offensive talent to translate to NFL talent. We see it all across the board. I think the only Tennessee fantasy player that I can remember, maybe two of them, would be Juwan Jennings and Alvin Kamara. I think those are the only two in the last, 10 years that I can think of that have actually amounted to fantasy success in varying degrees. But I will say that Chris Brazzell is absolutely more professional wide receiver than, say, like a Jalen Hyatt. That's it for tier 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So right after 2, 4, that's the drop off. And I don't think it's particularly close. You may like and I like some of the guys that happen after the drop off, but that mid second round range is just like a cliff. If you're a team that's rebuilding or retooling and you're stuck with 2 or 3 second round picks, if you can combo those with a player just to get into 2, 3, 2, 4 range, I'm good with that because absolutely nobody is trading out of the back of the first for a handful of second round picks in this draft. I'm okay with that watermark. If I walk away with Chris Bell as my dart, I feel way better about his upside relative to everybody else that's in the back of this round. And the reason I say that this is a drop off is because this is where consensus really starts to go by the wayside. So Nick Singleton, Emmett Johnson, and Zach Branch at 2, 5, 6, and 7. Those guys are all tier 6 players for me. They are a tier lower than the next 5 players that went off the board, 6 players that went off the board for me. We'll get into those in a minute, but I'm not in love with any one of these players. Singleton, really disappointed. I don't even think he was the best running back on his team last year. His teammate, Katron Allen, is actually in the tier above for me. I'm not completely out on Singleton, but I'm not taking him at 205. I would take him in the 3rd round pretty much all day. Same thing with Emmett Johnson. He didn't really test very well. He's got the, dual threat production available, but he's just not a prototypical size. I really am wary about him ever getting a lead role. If he ever was to get one, it might be very short-lived. And it's just overdrafting at that point. And same thing with Zach Branch. Straight up, Zach Branch was a highly recruited wide receiver prospect, but I don't even think he was the most productive compared to the rest of the guys in the 2nd round. And I don't think he has the same type of floor or ceiling as anybody else in the 2nd round. So maybe just a bit of a laggy pick, maybe behind on some things, but I'm not about Zach Branch. It's a very difficult receiver archetype to bet on. All right, so then the remaining 2nd round picks, we've got Skylar Bell at 208, Malachi Fields 209, Katron Allen at 210, Elijah Surratt 211, and Jeremy Bernard at 212. If these are my back end 2nd round picks, I'm all about Skylar Bell and I'm all about Jeremy Bernard, and I would say I would be about Katron Allen too. Fields and Surratt, I could take or leave. There's nothing particularly grabbing about either of them specifically. I know Malachi Fields is like the big T. Higgins prototype ball winner. I am actually not scared away by his 40 time. I don't think he's some lumbering skyscraper that's going to get, beat up in press coverage. He's still very raw though. Elijah Surratt is actually a decent prospect. So if Surratt was to land somewhere that needed size, let's just say the Giants, for example, because that's my team, I would absolutely be down with that. I feel like he does have some like Michael Wilson type ability to him. He's a big guy. He's never really going to wow you with anything. I don't think he's as physically talented as Michael Wilson, but that's unfortunately like the ceiling that you're envisioning here with a player like Surratt. You take him in the back of the 2nd round, you hold him on your dynasty league like you did for Michael Wilson for like 3 or 4 years. And then just when you think, the highly touted wide receiver prospect is going to, completely dominate, it ends up being Michael Wilson for a season, and it's not really worth a huge return. So at best, you're getting your 2nd round pick back in a better class. That's really the reason why I'm not super in on Surratt. Bell and Jeremy Bernard are similar players, in my opinion. I think Bell has the better tools. Bernard has the better floor. I don't follow college football. I'll tell you straight up. All the analysis that I do is going to be post-college season, and I go and I watch film and do all that type of research, but I don't follow the narrative of college football. So it was a surprise to me to hear that Jeremy Bernard, not Ryan Williams, who's the highly touted receiver prospect that's at Alabama, it was Jeremy Bernard that was the number 1 option in that offense. So that speaks to, at least to me, that like he's a competent receiver. And so I think he's good enough to where if he was to land somewhere as like a super 3 or like a low end 2, in the pecking order, that could vault up his value. There were a couple of trades in this particular draft. I don't remember which 2nd round pick it was, but one of them was moved in a bulk return for somebody taking a flyer on Deshaun Watson who needed QB depth. I won this league last year, so I had the 12 hole. I did not have my 1st round pick. And I had the 212 and I traded that for some QB depth myself because I'm trying to run it back. Jeremy Bernard was going to be who I drafted in that slot anyway, but then I don't pick until the 3rd round. But that's where we're going right now. The last player in my tier 5 that did not go in the 2nd round was Garrett Nussmeier, quarterback. I would absolutely have taken him in the 2nd round in those back picks over many of the other guys that I had mentioned before, especially if you're comparing Garrett Nussmeier at 3-1 here and Ty Simpson at 2-1 here. I don't think there's 12 picks difference between those players. I got to be honest with you. If we're talking about quarterbacks that are decently talented and can run offenses, they may not get 1st round capital. That doesn't put 12 picks of distance between them. So I think if you get Garrett Nussmeier here at 301, that's a great value. And I would probably say the same thing about Carson Beck and maybe one other quarterback, but we'll get there. But 3rd round was Garrett Nussmeier, Damon Claiborne at 3-2. Le'Veon Moss, I think, at 3-3, Ted Hurst at 3-4, Jasir Taylor at 3-5, and Jam Miller at 3-6. Once you've hit like the 3rd or 4th cliff in a talent depleted draft, you're really just throwing darts. Ted Hurst has a decent amount of ceiling. I've never been a huge fan of his Same thing with Damon Claiborne. You're looking at best, a scat back upside, which could provide you with occasional running back 3 upside. A guy like Jasir Taylor, sitting on your roster for 2 or 3 years, then the incumbent running back ends up leaving in free agency or getting hurt. Maybe he gets some run for a half season or more. Same thing with Jan Miller. I'm not super in on these guys, but the back end of the third round is actually where I ended up liking a few of the players. So Michael Trigg, tight end at 3.7, followed by Max Clare, tight end at 3.8, Carson Beck at 3.9, Deion Burks 3.10, Brendan Thompson 3.11, and my pick was 3.12, going with Bryce Lance. At this range of the draft, I'm really just taking shots at positional value and guys that might be able to trip into a short-term starting role, like if you're a running back. For quarterbacks, the second they get starting reps, they're going to be on your radar. Pick-wise, if they were to be announced as the week 1 starter, you're already in late second-round territory. That's just what the market is in a Superflex league. So I've seen it over and over again, whether it's Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler, anybody that just comes off the bench and starts as a young player, you're in second round territory. So if nothing else, you're getting an early return on your investment if any of these guys sees the field as a rookie. But Trigg and Clare, I like Clare more than Trigg. But Brendan Thompson was the fastest 40 this year. I'm just not super in love with him as a receiver. I've seen faster players that are more in the receiver role that just haven't really done much in the NFL. And Xavier Worthy is honestly the first one that comes to mind. That's probably not fair, but I felt like he was a better speed prospect coming out, and I just have not seen the return on any Worthy shares from anybody that I've talked to. So I'm not super in on Thompson, but if you want to take a shot on him here, it's cool with me. But Bryce Lance is the other one that I wanted to call out by name. If you didn't know, he's Trey Lance's brother, failed quarterback prospect from 2021. Was it 2021? Yeah, that draft burned me pretty bad. But I do like his red zone upside. Tall, lanky, box out receiver. I think you can translate that to the next level, if nothing else. Even if he's like a occasional wide receiver 3 start for you, and he lands somewhere to, help your young quarterback get his touchdown totals up for the season. But could be something there. Going into the 4th round here, scraping the bottom of the barrel here. Sam Roush, tight end at 4.01. Antonio Williams, 4.2. Drill Aller, 4.3. Taylon Green, 4.4. And Seth McGowan, 4.5, followed by Kevin Coleman, 4.6. If you don't know who most of those guys are, I don't blame you. Just know that there's quarterbacks down there. If you can find Drew Aller in the 4th round, all day, even if he gets like 5th round capital, just do it. He started a whole lot of games at Penn State, ended up getting hurt this year, and there's still tools there. Taylon Green, if you can believe it, I classify as a poor man's Justin Fields. He is an athletic freak, but super raw. I honestly don't think that Justin Fields was ever as questionable with the ball throwing compared to how Taylon Green is, but he blew up the combine with NFL records set by quarterbacks for athletic testing. If he gets on the field, he's going to be fantasy relevant. I don't care if he's a long-term starter or what. Rushing quarterbacks. We are like 15 years into this phenomenon, 20 years into this phenomenon, folks. They put up points just rushing the ball. Even if it's terrible for an NFL offense, it's going to produce fantasy value. So it's worth a dart. It's worth a dart. That's all I'm saying. Specifically, Antonio Williams, because I'm a fan of Jeremy Bernard, if you happen to miss on Jeremy Bernard or Skylar Bell or one of those guys as like those budget wide receivers, Antonio Williams is like the budget to the budget wide receiver. If he's going in the 4th round, I think that's a worthwhile thing to do. God forbid he lands somewhere where they have absolutely no wide receiver talent to speak of. He could carve out a role and then just be your productive, wide receiver 3, in some cases, maybe wide receiver 4. 3 is kind of lofty, but we'll see. Seth McGowan, and I'm going to talk about one guy that went later as well, are pretty much the only 2 running backs back here that I'm interested in putting draft capital in. So Seth McGowan was the Kentucky running back, I'm pretty sure. He's bounced around a lot. He had some off-field issues. He went to prison specifically, and he got out, and he's also an older prospect too. He's 25. It's going to turn off a lot of people, but he is one of the only players in this range that has like notable SEC production to speak of. If he was to trip into a running back competition, I think he's got the skills and the testing to cement himself as the lead role for a little while, and that could be an easy return on investment. The other one that I'm going to talk about with him in a concert is Jaden Ott, who went over at 4.11. He's the other running back for similar reasons. No off-field stuff that I'm aware of, but he had an amazing season sophomore year. And then he just dropped off and then fell out of favor with the coaching staff and never really matched that production. But again, similar thing. He put it on tape. He's clearly capable of it. Whether you can get that back out of him is up to the team. But I think it's a worthwhile dot here. I'll be honest with you, like the rest of the guys down here, I didn't even tier them. The rest of these guys, maybe Eric McAllister, wide receiver, that went at 412 could have been interesting, but he just broke his foot at his pro day. So we're way off draft boards at this point. If we're looking at the overall landscape, you can see that these tiers are rather fat just based on the supply and demand. So when you have Love by himself, and then you have 6 players, there's your top 6. That's where you want to live in this draft. If you're not living in top 6, I want Concepcion, Stowers, Cooper, and maybe Boston in those next 4 picks. Back end of the first round, I want Ty Simpson, unless he gets better draft capital, as well as Jadarian Price. Then we can talk about Mike Washington. We can talk about Jonah Coleman, Chris Brazel, and Chris Bell. Beyond that, though, I'm really just going to be shooting for guys that I can kind of just put my crosshairs on. Like, instead of just throwing a dart and saying, I don't know who this guy is, I don't know what he's going to do. In this draft, I'm taking floor. I can totally understand going for the huge boom bust prospects like Chris Brazel, Malachi Fields, those type of guys. I kind of also just want floor. I feel like Jeremy Bernard, Skylar Bell, these are guys that could sit on your roster for like 3 years. And then by the time you're competing and you hit an injury wave, you can just throw that guy in for like 2 or 3 weeks and he'll get you by until your starter comes back again. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. This is not a draft where I'm going to be trying to wheel and deal and try to get all these guys crazy returns because nobody's doing that. I can do some honorable mentions of undrafted guys. So Eli Heidenreich was the running back from Navy. He does a lot of pass catching. He's like the scat back du jour this year. He was nowhere on anybody's radar. I'm not even sure if he's going to get drafted in the real NFL draft, but if for some reason he tripped into a third down role, he's productive enough with the ball in the air, even if he's not going to be rushing it. Tyson Williams is also still, as of this moment, not in the sleeper player pool, so he's not even draftable in these unless you submit a placeholder to your league and they allow that type of stuff. But he was the John Carroll wide receiver that, kind of was the talk of the town a month ago, and now no one said anything about him since. He's worth a dart, I guess, if you got the space for it. The other couple darts I want to throw as undrafted is wide receiver Jeff Caldwell out of Cincinnati. You want to talk about like a skyscraper Godzilla type wide receiver. This dude is friggin' huge and could, be a big boy in an offense. Not expecting much, but I'm just taking traits at this point. Cole Payton, Joe Fagnano are 2 quarterbacks that, very well just be camp arms, but also could trip into some availability as well. But that's going to do it. I do have more of these pre-NFL drafts. I'm in one right now. I've got another one coming up within the next week, a week and a half or so. And then once the NFL draft comes up, I'll update how things are going here. What was a good pick, what was a bad pick. So I've got a whole lot more of that coming. But I wanted to get this on the record just because it's helpful to see where things are actually going before you actually have to be the one to pick it. There's not a ton of this specific content out there, at least from what I've found. And I'm really just not afraid to make these picks. Like when you trust your process and you're not overconfident in things, you kind of just are able to do it like you would anything else. I do understand the argument of why would you draft ahead of the NFL draft? And that's a fair argument. It's the same thing with, drafting your fantasy league, before training camp and injuries start happening. It's a fair thing, but also by the same token, you can get decent values that you otherwise wouldn't. I remember last year I was in a league that drafted early and somebody ended up getting Jaden Higgins, wide receiver from the Texans, in like the 3rd round. So it's give or take. Again, if you like this type of stuff, you can follow and find it here and other places. I've got condensed versions of this. If you just want the cliff notes, if you will, the focus of this podcast is not to dominate everything everywhere. All that's required of you is to win your gap and you'll win your league. I'll see you next time.